Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Cyber Liability webinar, and it's all about understanding cyber liability. My name is Anae Augustini. I'm CEO of CID Insurance Programs, and I'm here to introduce a couple people to you. Our instructor today is Meredith Bennett, the National Tech and Cyber Product Leader for USLI. Super wealth of knowledge for cyber, and so please feel free to ask questions as we go along. Also with us is Sienna Vasquez, our professional lines underwriter, and she's here to quote all the cyber that you need for your clients. And then last is Jacob Cole, but not least, he's our lead marketing specialist, and he takes care of everything behind the scenes so that this runs smoothly. So let's move on and talk about some logistics. Okay, everyone probably knows the routine already, but I'm going to say it anyways. You're going to be on mute, able to hear but not speak, but your voice is important. So please pose questions in the chat room anytime throughout the webinar, and we'll stop and answer your questions as we go along. There'll be a short survey at the end of the webinar, and we really do appreciate your feedback as to how the value that you got from the webinar and any recommendations that you might have for the future. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Meredith Bennett.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I love to talk about cyber, so I know this webinar is scheduled for 30 minutes, and I will try and keep it to the 30 minutes. We want to learn a little bit about how to communicate the importance of cyber to your clients, gain an understanding of what cyber is and how breaches occur, and kind of walk through a claim and then how to successfully sell to the client. So we have a lot to cover in 30 minutes. So as Anae said, please feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I will try and answer them as we go along. So, what is cyber? Cyber generally refers to a data breach, a breach of personally identifiable information. That's kind of the original purpose as to why it was designed. It was, the policies were designed as data protection policies. And important to note that this will include non-digital exposures. So if you are, trying to sell cyber to a client, he says, well, I don't use computers. Well, guess what? All those boxes of paper records that you have lined up in your office, that would fall under a cyber policy as well. So it's not just those who use computers that would need a cyber policy, but I would say at this day and age, how do we get around without computers, right? Just a few housekeeping items. When you're talking about cyber, you're gonna hear the acronym PII, personally identifiable information. So just so that we're all on the same page, it's private consumer information, which includes unique identifiers that relate back to a specific person. Personal health information, PHI, this is your medical information. As I said, a data breach is always the unauthorized theft or disclosure of this private information. That's really the heart of a cyber policy. We'll talk about some other things that can be taken. Obviously, money is one of them. But, it's really all about protecting information. You will hear the term network security and privacy liability when you're also selling cyber. So, cyber is this big term that could mean a lot of different things. People say, does this have cyber? Well, what type of cyber are you looking for? And that's what we're going to try and unravel and unlock here during this presentation. Network security and privacy liability is a part of cyber liability, and it's that word liability. You were negligent. You are at fault. You caused a breach to occur. It's often on somebody else's system because we usually see this phrase contractually. So maybe I'm coming onto your premises to do a job for you. I could be anybody, right? I could be a consultant, I could be a contractor. A lot of the companies now, they were always asking for me to carry GL. Now they're also asking me to carry network security liability in case I cause a breach while I'm in there at your location doing a job. So you'll see this a lot in the contracts, and it is a part of cyber liability. There's a lot of laws protecting us as consumers and businesses. There's a series of overlapping state laws and federal laws that help to govern data privacy in the U.S., primarily enforced by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, the Department of Health and Human Services, that's who oversees HIPAA, and the state's attorney general, so that's at the state level. And all of these laws kind of started in the late 90s, early 2000s. Not surprising, that's also when the first cyber policies started to emerge. So there is definitely a correlation there. Now, I'm guessing a lot of you are in California. California, even if you're not in California, California is cool from a privacy perspective if you're nerdy like me when it comes to this stuff. California was the first state to have a breach notification law. And, you can read that it requires notification of any resident of California whose unencrypted personal information is or is reasonably believed to have been acquired by another person. And the state of California went on to define personal information. And I'm not going to read this to you. You can read this yourself. But later they added medical health information, username and email address, data collected through the use or operation of an automated license plate recognition system. They were really innovative and cutting edge, and California still is. But they were the first to have a law of its kind, and kind of what the other states did was they were like, well, California, you're so cool. We want to copy you because you did it right and you had a really great idea. So a lot of the states took this initial definition from California's privacy or data breach law and kind of adopted it for their own data breach notification. And so now every state does have their own breach notification law. But guess what? California added this, and then maybe Massachusetts went on to add something different, and Arizona went on to add something different. So even though a lot of the states kind of pointed to California as a good starting point, they're not all the same. So it gets really tricky really fast, especially if you as a business owner have people's information that are in different states, because now you have to worry about every single state law. It's not about where your business is. It's about where the person resides. So if you are a business in Arizona, but you have people that are, coming to you, customers, consumers whose information you have in California, Washington, Oregon, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, you have to worry about all of those laws, not just the state of Arizona where your business is. So really quick, really tricky, really fast. I'm just going to skip that slide and we'll go back to that. California, again, so cutting edge. They came out with the California Consumer Privacy Act, which a lot of people were kind of comparing to the European Union's privacy law over there. And this was really innovative and the first of its kind in the United States. Now, California, effective Tuesday, voted for Proposition 24, which means the California Consumer Privacy Act will be amended. So this was already new, and now California just voted to amend this to the California Privacy Rights Act, which includes the establishment of a new privacy enforcement agency. So again, California, very cutting edge. And I'm going to explain why that's important in a little bit. I just wanted to give you some background. Other laws that protecting consumers, I mentioned HIPAA, Gramm-Leach-Bliley, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And then, although it's not a law, there is a set of standards put forth by the Payment Card Industry Data Security Council. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through here. The important thing to remember is if you collect, store, or transmit protected consumer data, you have to keep it safe. That's your responsibility as a business owner. And that's the important thing to relay to your clients as you're trying to sell them cyber. Oh, I don't need a cyber policy. My point of sale vendor is PCI compliant. That's great, but are you? The breach could occur at your level, not at your point of sale provider. So if you're swiping credit cards, you still need to make sure that you're protected. So what are the exposures? I love this pie chart because, there's hacker right there, 30%, bright red. That's probably what we all think of when we think of a cyber attack. It's hackers getting us. But if you look down at rogue employee, 11%, and staff mistake, 14%, combined, it's 25%, which is almost as much as a hacker. And that's just employees, the human error. Either you have an employee that went rogue or you have an employee that messed up. And I think that's really, really important to also kind of relay to your clients as you're trying to sell them cyber. It's not just about hackers. It's your employees too. I mean, we all make mistakes, right? We're human. So that staff mistake is pretty big. And then the rogue employee, you never know when somebody could steal information. Lost and stolen mobile device, that's 10%. I would even argue that that's human error as well. Like I left my unencrypted laptop, or even though my laptop was encrypted, I left the username and password taped to it. I'm sure I'm not the only one that I've seen people do that. I left that in the back of my car when I went to go to Starbucks, and I didn't lock my car and someone took my laptop. So already now we're more than just a hacker. Malware and virus and hacker, they kind of go hand in hand, but malware and virus, also there's a human element that goes into that. Oops, I went the wrong way. So social engineering, probably one of my favorite topics. Social engineering, you don't have to be a really savvy hacker in order to get in. And that's what's kind of scary right now. I also teach cybersecurity awareness training for USLI. And this is one of the things that we really hit home about, just training the employees, because it just takes one click for the hacker to get in. It just takes one lie over a phone call for them to somehow, get access to something. So social engineering is the use of deception to obtain unauthorized access. You're basically tricking people to do something that they wouldn't normally do. My children try and social engineer me all the time. Phishing is probably the one that we're all most familiar with. Baiting and tailgating, it sounds like a hacker party. I guess maybe to them it is. But these are also other ways that they social engineer us. Vishing with a V is another one. There's also, I think it's smishing, which is via text message. I mean, the names just get goofy. But basically, they're tricking you into doing something that you wouldn't normally do. It's usually via a link that's in an email that downloads some type of virus or malware into the system. Ransomware is most common. And ransomware is when there is a virus that encrypts all of your files, and when you go to get the information is not there. Instead, there's a nice little ransom note that says, pay us X amount in Bitcoin if you want to get the decryption key. And then if you pay them, you get the decryption key, and then you get all of your information back. Well, it's not always that easy. So we're going to walk through if Susie Q employee did click on that link and talk about some of the coverages that would respond in a cyber policy if that happens. Because I would say this is probably the most common that we're seeing right now is a phishing attack that leads to ransomware. All right. So Susie Q employee clicks on that link. It downloads ransomware on her system. Now what? Oh, Susie Q. All right. So Susie Q maybe is going to call her IT team. Maybe she doesn't have an IT team. Maybe Susie Q is a sole proprietor and it's just her. She's going to call the claims team right away. That claims number on her policy, reach out to the claims team. The claims team, 24/7 reporting. So right away, they're on it. They're going to contact the breach coach right away. A breach coach is an expert attorney with specialization in data breach. All right. You don't want your cousin Bob who just passed the bar and was focusing on entertainment law to handle your data breach. Don't want that. You want someone with specialization. They understand the patchwork and all of those laws. I mean, we saw earlier how complicated it got, and I was just touching the surface with all the different laws out there. They're going to work with a forensics investigator, and, you know, they're probably going to take a look at the cyber extortion first. All right, you got hit with ransomware. What do we need to do? Do we need to pay the ransom? Do we need a negotiator, etc.? So all of this, so far, what I've mentioned, the breach coach covered on the policy, cyber extortion covered on the policy. So there are different ways that one can be extorted that would fall under cyber extortion. The most common is ransomware. And a cyber extortion sharing agreement will cover the costs for the negotiator. Often it's the same as the forensics team. And the reason you want someone that's a negotiator is because they know how to kind of talk to the hacker and figure out what they know about you. Because if they're not sure whose system they got into, you don't want to tell them, right? You want them to think that it is maybe just Susie Q, sole proprietor, who doesn't make a lot of money. But if they somehow got in and encrypted files for, you know, Fortune 500 company who makes millions and millions and millions of dollars, you don't want them to know that because then they're probably going to make the ransom go up. Also, you'll find under either the cyber extortion sharing agreement or somewhere else in the policy a reward, where if something, you know, leads to the capture of these hackers, that we would pay a reward. I really wish that we had, you know, a lot more rewards that were paid out under this. But, you know, they're just really hard to catch, a lot of these hackers. The forensics team usually goes in and they're like, okay, how did they get in? Let's figure that out. What did they have access to while they were in there? Are they still in there? Maybe we need to get them out. And based on what the forensics team is able to uncover, that's when we know if we need to notify people or not. So, for example, you could have two different servers. On one server, you keep all of the personally identifiable information of your customers. On the other server, you don't. Maybe the hackers only had access to that server where your marketing material was. You may then not need to notify anybody, right? So forensics team is really instrumental in helping to determine what needs to happen next. And I can also share that, you know, ransomware has evolved over the years. And it used to be that these hackers would just send out a blanket phishing email attack and not know who they were targeting and not know who was clicking on the link, and they would have no idea who they were dealing with. Now it seems that it's a lot more targeted attacks. They know exactly who they're going after. Sometimes the ransomware is the icing on the cake, and that they've been in your system for 6 months. And when they had everything that they needed, then they deploy the ransomware kind of like as a goodbye. So then you start to negotiate with them, and well, we don't want to pay $1 million. We don't have $1 million. And they may say, oh, actually, no, we know that you have $1 million because we know that you're getting ready to pay your CEO his quarterly bonus of $1 million. So instead of just paying him, you can pay us. So they're in there for a while, and whether you pay the ransom or not, you just had potentially an extensive data breach because they were in there for months. So ransomware has really evolved over the years. In a perfect world, do we pay? No. Hopefully there's backups in place and you can restore the backups. So I mentioned notification. Again, if you need to notify everyone, this is also covered on the policy. And we're going to work with the breach coach, and we're going to craft a letter. We'll probably bring in a PR team, depending on how large the breach is, to help craft that letter, because you want that letter to not make people angry, right? I mean, they're going to be upset already because their information was just taken, but it needs to be handled very delicately, so that it doesn't create even more stress for the consumers when they get this notice. And it is typically done in the form of a letter. Yeah.
There's a question out there.
Oh.
That says all of my data is stored online or in various cloud sources. Can someone really extort me? I don't need my actual computer to access my information.
You don't need you don't need a computer to access your information. Yeah, I mean, you could, if you're storing your files in the cloud, that could still be encrypted. Who's your cloud provider? Your cloud provider could get encrypted. You could still get phished. I guess I need more information. But we write a lot of like managed service providers on tech, and that they kind of help to back up data. And sometimes if you're outsourcing your to your managed service provider and they get hit, that ransomware could still be deployed to their customers. So we're seeing that.
I agree with you, Meredith. And we haven't had a huge sort of cloud sourced service go down in a while, but they have gone down, or they've been hacked before.
Yeah. So in that case, if your cloud provider is hacked, your policy may not actually be the one that's paying the ransom, right? It would probably be the cloud provider, but you still may suffer a business interruption loss. You still may need to restore the data. So there are different scenarios that could happen. So I hope that answered the question. Yeah, thank you. All right, so notification. We were talking about, typically in form of a letter. Call centers may be utilized to manage the questions. This is all part of the cyber policy. If the data needs to be restored, that is part of the policy, because, maybe we don't want to pay the ransom, but you need to restore the data. Perhaps the ransom is paid and the hacker doesn't give you the decryption key. Sometimes that happens. You still need to restore the data. When you notify the people, you also want to provide them with credit monitoring. If you provide them with credit monitoring, it is hard for them to come up with damages that they suffered, because it's, the courts are kind of still split on if you can sue for fear of future harm. So that is a tool that we use to mitigate potential liability and class actions, is the credit monitoring.
We have
so
one more
that's usually
question.
Sure.
What's the average cost of a claim?
It really is all over the place. It depends on what happened. So, for example, one of our most recent claims, we had, it was an IT staffing agency, for lack of a better description. We'll call it a staffing agency. They had 19,000 independent contractors whose personal information they had on file. And they stored all of that in Amazon Web Services. So Amazon Web Services, nothing was wrong with, they didn't go down, they didn't get hacked, but the staffing agency did not have their security settings configured correctly in AWS. And so all of their independent contractors, all 19,000 independent contractors, their information was out there for anyone to see, their personal information. And so that was a data breach that we notified all 19,000 independent contractors. As of today, that claim was $15,000. So, you're probably floored, and that's probably a lot lower than you were expecting, right? Because it's a lot lower than I was expecting too. But there wasn't forensics that was needed because we knew what happened. The notification went out in letters. It's possible that a lot of those independent contractors didn't sign up for the credit monitoring because maybe they're already getting credit monitoring from another data breach, right? We as consumers are becoming desensitized. No one brought a claim against them either, so we're still kind of waiting for that. So really the only costs were, we had an attorney and we sent out notification and we're still kind of waiting to see if any more costs come out of that. So that's a really low scenario. On the higher side, I had a restaurant with credit cards that were breached. We didn't even need to notify the people because of the data that was taken. There's something called track 1 data and track 2 data, and if you've ever just randomly gotten a credit card in the mail and not known why, that's because the data that was taken wasn't really tied back to you personally. So they didn't need to notify you, but there was still a breach of that credit card information taken somewhere. So a little restaurant in New York, the point of sale was compromised at their facility at the restaurant. And that claim, I want to say between forensics and everything was $1.5 million. And we didn't need to notify anyone. And again, there was no lawsuit. But all of the forensics and things that went into it, it got really costly. So, and some business interruption and things of that nature. So it totally varies. There is a data breach cost calculator on our Business Resource Center if you go on our website. And I talk about that a little bit towards the end, where you can kind of play around with it. And Net Diligence really kind of aggregates all of this claim data, not only from USLI, but from other carriers, and aggregates all the claim data and is able to kind of put in a cost calculator. So you'll find that on USLI's website on the Business Resource Center. To help you with that. So I would say it's really, really hard to give you an average cost per breach. And I spent a lot of time on that question.
No worries. I think that was really valuable, Meredith. And we have a lot of interest. One more question. Are each of these areas of coverage under different limits? Are limits based on type of breach or ways in which to respond to a breach? That's 3 questions.
Sure. So the way that our policy is structured, and that's the tricky thing. I don't envy what you all do, because cyber is, everybody has their own form and we're all doing different things. It's not ISO, right? So you really just have to look at the policy. A lot of the times the first party expenses are one limit, and then the liability is a separate limit. Sometimes there is a combined policy aggregate. Sometimes some of these coverages are sublimited. You just really have to look at the deck page or the quote letter and maybe ask for the forms. I would say, like, we try and put anything that is sublimited, we spell out on the quote letter so that you can see it. And most of the things that are sublimited are crime and dependent business interruption, are probably the two that are the most common ones that we sublimit. And that goes for all the carriers. I know those are areas where all the carriers are sublimiting it. So if you have a $5 million limit for breach expenses, that would cover all of this that we're talking about: notification, forensics, a lawyer, public relations. You may still have a $100,000 limit for social engineering fraud that covers, if someone accidentally transferred money to who they thought was the CEO of the company. So here I get into business interruption a little bit. You're going to have a waiting period. You will have a limit. Sometimes that is up to the breach expense limit. Like I said, $5 million. Sometimes it is not up to the limit. If you need $5 million for a contract for breach expense limits, but you're only making $500,000, do you really need $5 million of business interruption coverage? You wouldn't do that on a property policy. So, are you doing it on the cyber policy? System failure damage is usually part of the business interruption, and that's if something happens to your system because it's not covered on the property. So a lot of these coverages are kind of meant to bridge gaps or fill gaps where you can't find it on your property or GL. Dependent business interruption would be, as we were talking about the cloud, what if the cloud goes down? And all of your information is in the cloud. Now what? You're going to have a major business interruption loss because you can't get to any of your clients' information because you're keeping it all, in the cloud, and the cloud just got compromised. So dependent business interruption, that is often sublimited. The reason for that is because of aggregation concerns from the carrier level. So if we're writing 1,000 policies that all use Amazon Web Services, and Amazon Web Services goes down, that's like a cat loss, right? If you think of it in terms of like a hurricane or something. Reputational harm, this is kind of like business interruption, but it's after the fact. So after you've notified everybody and all of this has happened, you're back up and running and you're selling your widgets again. No one's coming back to you to buy your widgets because you have reputational harm. So it is kind of similar to business interruption, but it happens after you're back up and running. And this is usually up to the limit of the first party expenses as well.
So one more question, Meredith.
Yeah, sure.
I think this might be a good one. One of the objections I get is I take all of the payments through PayPal. Does PayPal protect their vendors from cyber liability?
That I don't know. I don't know what the contract looks like with PayPal and the vendors.
I'll tell you what,
I don't know what that
from my experience with vendors,
Mm-hmm.
there is no indemnity for the person using the service, for the company using the service. I've never seen a contract that provided any indemnity. So they need to read the contract is what they need to do.
Right. And I would think a company like PayPal is going to have wording that's all in their favor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, good question.
Yeah, it was a great question. Cybercrime, lots of things fall under cybercrime. Telecom fraud, utility fraud, wire transfer fraud. Cryptojacking is a fun word. It's just so silly to me, the terminology that pops up in cyber. It makes it so fun. But utility fraud, basically, cryptojacking, if I hack into your computer, I may not really care about what information you have. I may just be wanting to use your computer for its power so that I can mine Bitcoin. In order to make money with Bitcoin, people mine it, and they need a lot of computer power. So they can hack in, use your server to help mine this Bitcoin. All of that takes power and energy off of your computer. It's going to slow your computer down. You're going to know that something's wrong, right? Somebody's in there, because your computer is going to be so slow because it's busy mining Bitcoin. And you're going to get your utility bill, and it's going to be through the roof because, now this is going to, if it's just your PC, probably not really going to see a huge spike in your utility bill. But if you're a really large company that has a lot of servers, you're going to see a spike in your utility bill. So it covers those costs. Same with telecom fraud. Sometimes people hack into the voice over IP system and just jack up the telephone bills. And usually what we've seen is that the person, the affected individual, is able to work with the telephone company, and the telephone company will usually go halvesies. So you can kind of negotiate that down. But if it's, $50,000 bill, you're still on the hook for $25,000 if the telecom company agrees to waive half of it or something. So that's where that coverage comes in. Wire transfer fraud is when hackers hack in and take the money, versus social engineering fraud, where you actually are the one that was like, oh, my CEO needs this money transferred to a different bank account, and you go ahead and do that. It is common. I feel like there's a lot of awareness that has been brought around that the past year or two, that people have gotten wise and they pick up the phone now and things. What we're seeing is some invoice manipulation fraud. So somebody hacks in, changes the invoice number, and then sends the bill to their vendor, and the vendor sends it to the wrong account. That wasn't really social engineering. It wasn't really wire transfer fraud. It's invoice manipulation fraud. So something to look for. And then products. We have it a lot in the tech space where we may have like an IT person that is used to, companies setting up new locations and then just ordering the equipment for them. So you order the equipment and send it to some, 123 Main Street address, and then you send your client the bill, and your client's like, what is this? I didn't tell you to order me, 5 new servers. And now he's out the money. So products, something to look for in social engineering fraud. Not everybody covers it. I keep going the wrong way. So all of that was first-party expenses. We didn't even get into the liability yet. So I'm going to try and quickly just hit on a few things here in the interest of time. But one thing to look for for the first-party expenses in your insuring agreements, is it reimbursement or is it pay on behalf? Personally, I think pay on behalf wording is the way to go for small business especially, because you're basically coming to the insurance company, and the insurance company just pays everything on the insured's behalf. There's no, reimbursement. So they don't have to come up with that money right from the beginning. And a lot of these small businesses don't have the resources to do that anyway. So just something to be aware of. So after all of these first-party things happen, now you're exposed for liability. Somebody may potentially bring a claim against you. And one of the biggest things that I do want to touch on, why I spoke so much about the laws in the beginning of this presentation, is regulatory action. Regulatory action is part of your liability. Again, it's usually a separate limit than the first-party expenses. Sometimes you may have a combined policy aggregate. It all depends on the carrier. But under the regulatory action, look and see how that's worded. Sometimes it's tied to a data breach. Sometimes it's just tied to a violation of a privacy law. So the reason why it's really important to have that broad wording is because the privacy laws are changing so rapidly, as California is showing us, that you don't want your regulatory action tied to a specific breach. You want it to be broad enough that any violation of a privacy law. So meaning, you know, I could be in violation of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act because I was collecting information of kids that were under the age of 13. I didn't have a breach, but I am still covered for being in violation of that privacy law if the FTC would come after me because of the wording in my form. So really important distinction there. How to sell to your client, you know, educate them in math. If you have the opportunity to do a webinar for like a chamber of commerce, you can get a lot of different businesses at the same time. Cross-sell your renewal book. And just remember, timing is everything. You know, use those opportunities for the news to try and sell to your clients. If you're in California, you know, the fact that they did approve the California Privacy Rights Act, that Proposition 24, maybe that's a great opportunity to talk to them about, like, hey, like, do you have coverage for if you're in violation of a privacy law? Because that's part of a cyber policy. So that just some things that I've seen, you know, that have worked for people. And a little bit about what USOI does. So everything I mentioned, yes. yes, we can do all of that. And we do it packaged with E&O. So that's really where we're aggressive in the cyberspace and where we are covering all of those things is when we package it with the E&O. And it's a lot of, you know, the E&O classes that we would package all of those coverages with would be technology professional classes, as well as miscellaneous, like management consultants, marketing consultants, anything that you would think of in the miscellaneous E&O space, we would package with that cyber. We do have a pretty short application, you know, compared to some. And every USLI cyber policyholder protects is the name of our product with the E&O. If anybody in professional lines at USLI, all the policyholders receive access to the Business Resource Center and our eRisk Hub. So I did mention it, you know, earlier where you could go on and find a data breach calculator. There are a few tools for you that you can access, but then to get full access to eRisk Hub, the policyholders get an access code. And there's all kinds of online risk management tools there for eRisk Hub. There's training videos to help train the employees how to thwart phishing attacks. There's all kinds of laws if they want to read the laws, if they're nerdy like me and, you know, open up a bottle of wine on a Friday night and read some California privacy law, they can do that. So it's all right there for them. So, and a little bit more about our products. We can go as low as $0. Average is about $2,500 to $5,000 for a retention. And we do split it up. So we have 4 different coverage parts. Each one is a separate coverage part. And we would love to see what you have. We'd love the opportunity to do some quotes. So please submit your applications to Sienna, and she'd love the opportunity to show you what we can do as well.
Thank you so much, Meredith. That was great information. I think by the questions that we got, that I think it was valuable to everyone. So thank you again for teaching for us today. And I just want to remind everyone, you see a little document that Jacob loaded that you can download called Why You Need Cyber, which is a marketing piece designed for you, each of our brokers, to use with your clients. Send it out with renewals, send it out as a new business marketing piece, cross-sell, that kind of thing with your existing clients. And you just fill in your information on there, or you can customize it however you want. It's yours, and there's a space for you to put your information on. So download that. Jacob's going to send out a number of pieces after for those that attended today. So that will be one of the pieces he's going to include as well in case you don't end up downloading it now. And then make sure you visit our website, cidinsurance.com. All our applications are there, and we just make it really easy for you to do business with us. There's a lot of tools there, so take peruse the website well, and we look forward to doing more business with you and writing some cyber. Thanks again for attending. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. Take care.